Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in three ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on Keith Mizwicki. Did I get the last name right for once?
You did. That is correct.
Score. All right. I'm going to chalk that up as a win and end it right now. Just kidding. Great to have you on here. Big Chicago guy. We've had a few Chicago guys on before. Kenny McCudden, Brian Kane. So excited to add to that list of legends.
Good stuff.
So you're a longtime coach and I believe listener of the podcast, first time on as a guest here. So first time caller. Really appreciate it. I kind of wanted to start with your background a little bit because you're not a full-time hockey guy, yet you work with some absolutely phenomenal hockey players. So, how did you go about creating this background and expertise?
First of all, thanks, Greg, for having me on. I appreciate it. Yes, longtime listener. And researcher and love seeing some of the posts and the articles that you're providing up on Twitter. So it's a good source of knowledge, I think for myself and for a number of coaches and teachers that are in this space. So a little bit about me. I'm born and raised in Chicago, particularly the southwest suburbs. Grew up playing Tier 2 hockey in the area and ended up playing Division 3 hockey at St. Norbert College up in De Pere, Wisconsin. I am married. I have 3 kids, and I have one son who is playing U15 Tier 1 hockey right now. So whether he likes it or not, he's jumping on the ice with me on a fairly regular basis. But the additional value that he gets out of it is that he gets to be surrounded by a number of, higher level players who have sort of been through where he's at, could share their experiences on a regular basis. And, he can see firsthand what it's all about, both physically and mentally, which is just awesome. On the professional side of things, I head up analytics at a company called Intelsat. We provide, communication services through global satellite networks for a number of different verticals. And I specialize in one particular in Chicago, which is doing a lot of support for commercial aviation. So, I take a lot of that in terms of sort of building a team culture and working on individual development plans to sort of try to get the most out of people, layering that with a lot of work in the analytics field. I'm applying a lot of those principles and practices down to individuals that I work with on the ice or small groups of players that I'm working toward to try to understand kind of where they're at, what makes them tick, what are they motivated by, what are they interested in, and how can we get the most out of them, both physically and mentally. Coached for 20 plus years, several at the Tier 1 level, both boys and girls. Spent about 8 years coaching girls hockey, all the way up to the Tier 1 level. And my daughter had played at that level for a while, so that's how I got myself involved in coaching, as any hockey dad would. Trying to lay the right sort of foundation with the right set of skills and principles and habits. And interestingly enough, I still keep in contact with many of those players that I work with way back when, even to this day, we're jumping out on the ice in small groups and trying to get them to, where they need to be in the form of their lineup or in their team play, whether they're at Northeastern or whether they're Lindenwood, St. Cloud. There's a number of different players that I work with from all over in the Chicagoland area, as well as Indiana and in Western Michigan, that come out and jump on the ice with me, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I think what drives me, like, why am I still involved in doing this? What really drives me is that I feel like I've got enough important knowledge to be able to deliver it back to this next generation of players. And I'm just deeply passionate about trying to learn from others and research different methodologies and techniques, as well as sort of staying on top of where the game is evolving. And I mean, it's changed quite a bit.
So studied would be a good word to describe you.
100%. That's a very good adjective.
All right. Well, from that, you're also managing that with your expertise in your professional life, which is data analytics. I'm assuming you're competing against companies like Iridium and whatnot.
Yeah. Iridium and Marsat, there are some new players that are in the market, a gentleman by the name of Elon Musk and what he's
you got the little Starlink going there.
to disrupt things in a way in the form of Starlink. So yeah, we're certainly, something that we have to keep an eye on from a competitive landscape. And we've got some things that we're always looking at to sort of sustain ourselves in the marketplace and do some things that are going to, make ourselves, be one of the top players in the market. So I think we need to look at that both from a professional perspective and things that we do, on the side, in this case, working with, some of the best athletes in the game.
Yeah. So obviously you're a big data guy, you're well studied. When you're looking to study a player's game, I'm assuming you're taking a quantified approach, really diving into analytics and stats and data. First off, is that true? Secondly, if yes, how do you go about that and what's important to you?
Yeah, very, very much so. It's often, I often joke with some folks outside my network that it's really becoming difficult to sort of watch the game for enjoyment, because you're sort of analyzing patterns and habits and what's actually happening, how the sort of the dimensions of the game are changing on a very rapid basis. And so, the way that I've done it in the past is, in the way I currently do it for just a handful of players is probably looking at close to about 35 to 40 different measures. And depending on what that is, it varies by position, but I'm just limited to forwards and defensemen. I stay away from the goaltenders. They are on their own, and there's plenty of people who are 10x better than me in that space than what I can offer, other than just stop the puck. But yeah, for forwards and for defensemen, the level of metrics and the sort of attention around it has really increased in orders of magnitude. And it's really cool to sort of see things evolve from that front. But, for me, I think it's important to obviously look at things like shift count or time on ice, as well as any statistics that are related to possession or skills that can influence possession and playmaking, how often those things are happening, what the success rates look like. And also location. So where does this player tend to make the most plays? Is it, there's not very much pressure and plays tend to be more regroup fashion, or are they actually, executing a number of plays that are maybe below the rings in the offensive zone that are leading to A chances or B chances? There's things that you want to look at and sort of peel the onion on some of these top level statistics that can provide some more meaningful information to a player. And on the back end, it's things like exits and their success rate, their ability to either extend possession on their own end or do so through a pass. And then also, their ability to activate in the play if there is an opportunity. Conversely, on the flip side, how often can a defenseman shut down plays, force dumps, chip ins, bad decisions, et cetera. So looking at a player from a defenseman's perspective, looking at a player's ability to be able to shut things down, transition effectively, and make the right next best play to extend possession. These are all sort of the metrics that I think a number of us are looking at. And as it relates to shots, right, there's obviously a couple main areas that you want to focus on, but when we're thinking about players' ability to shoot off the pass, depending on if they're coming in on their off wing, strong side, you see a lot of players now. They're just they're highly agile in terms of their ability to shoot while skating backward, shooting inside open hips, shooting inside of a pivot. So these are all sort of ways in which, you can analyze the game. And then it's about taking what you see and what and being able to work with players, depending on what level you're working with, to try to insert some of that to at least open some doors for them to see what is possible and where and why it's relevant.
Are you tracking these metrics by yourself? Are you finding outside help? Are there public resources? Or how do you go about finding your data?
Yeah, I track a lot of it by myself through video. And, I've got, it's usually multiple computers, right? You've got video that's going on one machine, and then you've got a spreadsheet going somewhere else. I do, use a favorite BI tool of mine to make things a little bit more automated and a little bit more visually appealing, which is always, pretty cool for a player to see. But yeah, it's, I still find it's a fairly tedious effort to be able to collect a lot of the data and then obviously summarize it, interpret it, and then work with the player to take some sort of action. It all needs to be sort of this closed loop feedback cycle. And, to be frank, like, it could be a 2 or 3 game sample that a player is interested in, and it gives them sort of, here's a baseline of where I'm at. Here's some direction I need to maybe improve my possession rates, or maybe my ability to get more touches inside my 12, 15 minutes of ice time. It could be those sort of subtle things that a player just needs to recalibrate themselves for the rest of their season.
Excellent. And I'm curious, you've worked with many players. You've worked with some players that are very elite. And then you've worked with some players that are maybe in the middle of the lineup or at the lower end of the lineup. Do you find one to be easier than the other? Are there different things you're working with based on kind of where they filter in? Because obviously the elite players are able to try more things in games, get away with more things, have a little bit longer leash compared to a player that's maybe in the middle of the lineup, or, they're just trying to survive rather than like, oh, I tried this and that, those types of things.
Yeah, good question. So the answer is yes. I think so. There's no one size fits all approach, as I'm sure you're aware of. And depending on, with older players, depending on what their roles are, you may have to tailor your plan accordingly. And so, for somebody who is higher skilled, who now is in more of that third or fourth line role, time on ice is diminished. They're playing a different role depending on what the structure or philosophy of the coach is sort of driving home, like what messages those are. And so, there may be less opportunities for them to try to execute things effectively and efficiently off the rush. It may be a chip and, chase it down, finish your check, get yourself to the net, establish body position, and try to make something happen within 25 to 40 seconds. So the way I approach a player who's in that type of role is, I don't want them to just shelve everything they've known that got them to this point, right? There's been a lot of technique and skill and the right set of habits that this person has displayed consistently, game in, game out. And that's not lost. So whatever their role is, we still try to hit on those types of things. Now, we may do some things a little bit differently than what maybe a first or second line type of forward or a top two pair defenseman or top four pair defenseman might be doing. You've got some areas of the ice location wise that maybe you want to hit on a little bit more with some higher end players because they're getting more looks into those particular areas, or maybe they're getting a little bit more minutes on power play, so that you could sort of hit those finer areas, whether it's off wing touches and shooting, or whether it's movement up at the offensive blue line, areas that that, okay, through our dialogue, we know that you're getting these types of situations and these types of minutes. Like, let's work on that type of stuff. If you're not, that's okay. We're going to go back to, some of the roots and some of the things that got us there, some of those foundational elements. But at the same time, like, let's work on some things that make you more effective down low. Could be, I'm struggling with receiving rims, whether it's forehand or backhand, and then making a quick cut back and then taking things to the net, or making the play back up to the point. So, dialing in the pressure down in those particular areas, or making it a little bit more challenging within a confined space where they know they're just going to fight and battle for traffic, is something that we try to insert into their plan.
Got it. So each player gets a plan. So say I'm one of your new players. How would you go about devising that plan, and what does that plan look like?
Yeah, and it's going to vary if we're talking, a 12 or 14-year-old versus a player who's maybe playing junior hockey or in their first couple of years of college. But for a brand new player, one of the things we talk about is, what are your objectives? What do you want from this? If you have some game clips that can sort of supplement what it is that you're trying to accomplish and what is it that you want to achieve, that is very helpful information for me to be able to take a look at, maybe call out 3 or 4 particular areas, but then also not just areas of focus, but also things that this player is doing well that we want to continue to sort of drive home. So this whole idea of, I have a set of strengths, I want to continue to utilize those strengths, is important for the teacher or coach to be able to recognize within the player. Typically it will take something like 3 to 5 skates for me to get a sort of foundational view into the project that I'm working on. And for some players, I know that after 2 or 3 sessions, there are some particular things that they're really going to have to work on from a posture, mobility, skating, and edge work perspective. So we're going to tend to guide the plan toward that. Whereas, we have, we have other particular players who are tremendously talented skaters who are very agile, can cut back in any direction, who are very seamless with their transitional movement, that, they may not be as good as handling the puck while using their eyes to sort of scan the ice. And so we're going to hit on that a little bit more, just so that they can provide both the asset that they bring to the table, which is the lower body movement or the upper body control, but we're going to configure that with, let's rep high-paced sort of archetype movements where we're sort of stressing the eyes as much as we possibly can. And then we'll start to layer in maybe, some pressure variables just to see if they can make those plays at full speed inside their movements.
Got it. So there's not like a piece of paper that, hey, we agreed on this, you knew this, and that. It's more of an ongoing dialogue that you're having, or is that a combination of both?
It's a combination of both. For these players that I'm working with in this first series of sessions, the sessions will be videotaped, and then it helps me, really sort of put pen to paper, watching, observing, making sure that they're leaving with a tool that provides some sort of retention benefit. And it allows me to go deep into each one of the players. I'll then provide a recap to them via email, just listing out my observations, as well as kind of what's in store in terms of the plan for the next time we hit the ice. All of that because it could be very overwhelming for a new player, depending on age and background that you're working with. You don't want to throw too much at them. In some cases, you want to see where the session goes. But the follow-up piece with video summary, as well as a summary of observations and focus on where we want to take the agenda, is definitely important.
Got it. In all the sessions that you post that I've seen, there's a lot of work on posture, mobility, scanning, being able to read and react to what is unfolding in front of you. So I'm curious, why are you focusing on posture? Why are you focusing on mobility? Why scanning? Why are those kind of like the key tenets that come out in a session run by you, or am I missing any other ones?
I'm sure, depending on where we take the conversation, there's probably a number of different routes we can go down, but yeah, you've hit it on the head. So, what I'm really trying to work on with the players that I'm invested in is to build a foundation that is very dynamic. If we peel the onion back on that, we want somebody who is very fluid in their movements, their ability to change direction, change speed, possesses a high crossover to stride ratio, and is very seamless in their movements when they transition from forward to backward. And they're able to blend those things quite often and quite easily. And it all goes back to posture. So, in order for a player to execute these types of movements seamlessly, they have to be familiar and understand the weight distribution in their skates, whether they're too far forward, centered in the middle of their blades, or maybe they're back in their heels. What I notice with defensemen is that when we work on their offensive part of the game, they're very much, they feel their comfort zone is in, weight is distributed in the middle of the back, right? Because typically they're moving in that direction while defending plays. And we really have to work to get them more comfortable to be on the balls of their feet. With forwards, oftentimes what I'll see is when they're transitioning from forward to backward, we see that they're a little bit top heavy, and they end up with a little bit too much lean in their toes. It's making those adjustments, and it's getting both forwards and D very comfortable with the movements, regardless of direction, forward, backward, moving lateral, linear, that their posture is a constant. And they also need to, develop a feel for what that is like. So if I'm too far forward, what does that feel like? If I'm too far back, what does that look like? You could see a lot of that come to fruition when you're videotaping, especially when you're looking at turns and you're looking at pivots. You could see that quite often. And, that's an area where sometimes the player just doesn't feel it and they need to see it. But what we try to do is at least take a little bit of video to help support that, or screenshots that say, here's what we want, here's where you're at. And that way they can compare and contrast.
Feel, coaching through feel. Mad respect on that, because I feel like not enough people talk about the feel of sport. Like whatever is being coached needs to be transmitted into athletic feel. So therefore it gets sunken into the athlete. And I think that's kind of like the ultimate game or practice to game transition or transfer, because they can feel it. And I feel once you have a feeling, that sticks with you. But if you just, if I see this, then I do that, it's a little clanky, it may take a little bit longer. So I love that you're talking about feel And I call it field-based learning. How can we get as close as we can to just field-based learning where things are felt? But it's tough when you're using video and you're using verbal feedback to put the two together. And I think, like you said, meshing the video with the feeling you're having and watching how the two come together really solidify that and help athletes make some giant leaps in a very quick succession.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, and to add, it's okay to take a player through something that you know isn't right, just so they feel it. And then you can say, okay, that is a baseline for a movement that may not be the most efficient. And let's work on something that's more efficient. And then you tell me what the difference is between pre versus post.
That's awesome. And I love how you're talking about you're having dialogue with the player. This isn't, I'm doing this today and you're going to learn this today. It seems to be very open of where the athlete wants to take it and allowing them to own their own development and have a feeling of agency and control on how they're getting better. And my own, I'll let you talk about your own, but
Yeah.
for me, the more that an athlete feels like they're owning it, the more likely they are to take everything and go the extra mile, and do things on their own and really take the steps away from the normal ice time.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's, the area, like we as coaches, facilitators, we can take them to a point. You could be the best demonstrator of anything that you want to demonstrate, and provide that foundation or that blueprint for a player, right? And they can rep it, and it gets to the point where it looks fantastic, and all of a sudden you're popping off a video, and then you're showing it on whatever social media platform that you typically use. But maybe that never, or that hardly ever exists, like through the course of the game. So, I mean, that's what you have to think about too, is like, getting players to, we are very much influential in a player's development. We can turn things sideways really quickly. We can, there's coaches that can zap the love out of the game, and it only takes 1 or 2 years before, you're rethinking the sport as a player and as an athlete. And we all of us need to remind ourselves of that. We are, as I mentioned, we are influencers. And when we have that time with an athlete, whether they're male, female, 10 years old, junior hockey, or pro, we've got to make the most of that time to make sure that we're providing, the right structure, guardrails where they need to be, but also that freedom and flexibility. And I can tell you, on the girls' side in particular, for having spent 8+ years working with girls and female players, is that they take everything very literally. So, you've got to be very careful in how you communicate what it is that you want. I always find myself saying, be creative inside of the rep, or inside of the pattern, or inside the combination of skills that we're working toward. Don't just copy what it is that I'm doing, or what I'm saying, or what the next player in line is doing. Be creative. It is a lab. It is a canvas. This is an environment that you can try things out, do it. If it doesn't work, understand why, or we can have a conversation about it. Or, it may be something that you want to just refine and configure and do something different with it. Let that be yours. And like I said, as instructors, or as teachers or directors, we are sort of orchestrating and architecting it. We can lay the groundwork, but ultimately it's up for them, and where they take it. And we are supporters, and we are drivers and advocates for where they want to take it.
I love that. Be creative inside of the rep and don't copy what you see. I think that is fantastic. Like, you're creating the environment, but you're also encouraging, and I call this personalizing your own practice. Like, personalize your reps, personalize your practice. Like, each rep you can try something different. Like it could be something slightly different. So say you're doing like a transition drill, maybe you catch one on your backhand, show for a backhand pass. The next one you show on the forehand, you're doing escape moves, and being able to personalize your practice and make it even more fun than it already is. Like I think that's just fantastic on how you approach that. And I found the same with the girls that I've coached, where it's very literal, and you have to give extra permissions many times.
Yes.
It's okay to explore, try some things out. Don't copy what you just saw. You have to almost like require, like if you see someone doing a rep right in front of you, you have to do something different than that.
Yeah, and perhaps putting it that way really resonates with some players to be able to accept that it's okay to do something different. As simple as altering your start of whatever rep that you're doing. Start facing the ice. Start with your back to the middle of the ice. Start with a little pull move. Start with a spin. Start under pressure. Start with a retrieval. I mean, there's so many things that you can sort of build and branch off of, and that's just the start of a drill.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And diving deeper into the training and practicing, you obviously have your son. You've trained everything up to the professional level with seasoned pros and Olympians. I'm curious, through the age groups, how do you approach that? And maybe what's more important, young versus as they evolve? Where have you been taking things from where you started to where you are now, and what you see as children become young adults?
Yeah, I've been on this journey, not only with my son, but a number of players, either in his age group or a number of players that were in the sort of female cohort that I was working with, that were really, really tight with my daughter in that particular age group. And so, seeing how they evolve over time has been, really a really interesting. I don't want to call it an experiment, although I do more of the experimentation with my son than anyone else. And if it works, then I end up adapting it to other players that have similar skills and traits. If it doesn't, then we toss it and we do something different. But yeah, it's to see how a player has progressed and how a player has evolved. From 9-10 years old, again, focusing on the right types of habits and making them aware and providing an education as to what it is and why it's important is absolutely key. So for any young players that are, I would say, under the age of 12, I mean, we've touched on this already, but, the hitting proper posture, making sure that players understand like what it feels like to have their weight distributed to different degrees in their feet, their stick positioning, and how it can be used to, present a good opportunity for a target, the technique behind a shot, all those sort of things that you're starting to engrave as players develop and as they mature. We often go back, or I often go back to those principles and practices as sort of habits and reminders and things that got us here. Each year that I work with players and I see them after they complete their midget season or their junior season or college season or a season at Worlds or the Olympics, every player is coming back with a little bit more information on what it is that they need to work on. And again, we're continuously dialoguing around what that is and what that could look like. We're constantly evolving and shifting our plans accordingly. For players who are, most impressionable, I would say, between, like I said, between 9 and probably 14 years old are really that sort of target areas where you want to hit the right set of habits as early and as often as you possibly can. And one particular player that I work with plays higher level pro hockey in Europe. There are a lot of foundational things that we had to dig into when he was playing Division I college hockey, that, you just don't, there's just not enough emphasis. Perhaps the landscape is changing at that level, but just not enough emphasis when this person was playing Division I college hockey that was sort of getting back to some of these, what I call fundamentals, or these foundational habits that, just didn't necessarily open up doors for this person while they were playing, a high level Division I hockey. And so as we spent a couple summers together, all we did at the end of the day was work on some of these principles, these things that are foundational, that led to the opening of doors to create more opportunity offensively.
And can you give us some examples of what those would be?
Yeah, I mean, things like changing direction and being very fluid both ways, inserting, a cut or a punch inside of a shot, being able to add more deception prior to releasing the puck coming in either on the strong side or the offside, and doing things like, being able to transform the way we shoot the puck, by pulling it in a little bit quicker or pushing it out, then pulling it in. So combining those sorts of elements, has really sort of helped airlifted this person's confidence and their ability to make things happen offensively.
Got it. I like this. And you've mentioned in the past the 3 V's of off ice shooting. I'm curious what those are for you. So we just talked about a lot on shooting. So I want to dive in maybe some more specifics of how you approach that and what you're looking for off the ice and maybe some progressions, et cetera.
Yeah, for sure. So a really good friend of mine who's used to be a former player of mine, he played D1 hockey. He's opened up his own little shooting station down in the southwest suburbs here in Chicago. And so him and I have plenty of conversation around, how can we improve youth player, boys and equally both on the girls side, their ability to shoot the puck, focusing on their release, focusing on their mechanics and their technique. We had spent, a number of hours together sort of brainstorming on what does a good progression look like? How much value can a particular player get out of this type of progression? What should we be concentrating on that's going to improve their success rates when they jump on the ice? How do we ensure that what it is that they're doing off ice translate to what they're doing on the ice as well? And making sure that, when we're working with players both off ice and on ice, that they have, that we hold them accountable to working on those types of techniques, whether the shot goes way off the glass or if it's deep in the corner or if it's not something that their sort of intended target looks like. What I ended up doing was I said, if we talk about the 3 V's of shooting, right? Volume, right? Of course, like, the more shots, the better, but we've got to make sure that, we also have a variety that we're after too. So different types of shot, being able to shoot off of both my inside foot, my outside foot, being able to drag the shot, hit a one-timer, be good with my stick in terms of redirects, tips, etc. And of course the backhand. So there's a number of different types of shots that we want to make sure. So each individual player needs to have a variety of shots in their portfolio that they can use at any given point in time, regardless of the location that they're at. The other area is just, making sure that we have the proper. You still there? Okay.
Yeah, still with you. So we have volume of shots, variety of shots. I'm curious on this third one. You've got me hanging on the edge of my seat.
Yeah. So on the third one is just the veracity of the shot. So we want to make sure that we're exploring different types of techniques and options to be able to functionally utilize a number of different shots in different areas. Going deep with an individual player in order to find that right sort of release point is going to be important. Difference by different players, but yeah, we want to make sure that when players are spending time off ice, that they're keeping those things in mind as they're working on the plan that they have in place, whether it's off ice or on ice.
Awesome. Really enjoying this conversation, and there's so many places we could take it, but I want to keep it within the rails for right now, and we might have to have you back on because we could blow this sucker out of the water. And I know you're being nice to keep us on track here. But one thing you had posted that I thought was really great was a tweet way back from July 6th of 2020, talking about routing and proximity as a key theme as you had players in pairs and threes. I'm curious for you, when you were going through that, like what are you trying to get out of it? How did you come about that being the theme that you wanted to focus on? Because I think routes are not talked about at all and are of an absolute vital importance to successful and high level hockey, especially.
Yeah. So I ended up, at first sort of drafting things out into more of a decision tree type of schematic as it relates to entries, and sort of looking at things to see if there was a common set of routes that might be more beneficial or less beneficial depending on handedness and those sorts of things, and maybe what the situation is. So kind of taking that a step further, it gave me a sense of what options exist. And more importantly, when I watch video of a particular player, what are their tendencies? Some players have more of a tendency to go on their strong side and enter in that area. And if that's the case, if they're running out of room or running out of space, they end up cutting back, and now they end up on a backhand. And typically, if they're under pressure there, it makes it very difficult for them to sort of make a pass inside the middle part of the ice. So they often just hand it off if they've got support there, or they end up throwing it down below the icing line. So common problem, right? And so, if there's opportunity for players to be able to route elsewhere and perhaps come in on their off wing or more in the middle of the ice, that can open up some doors and lead to that player driving a little bit more offense. And that could potentially lead to, more chances or more shots on net. So in thinking about route structures and player proximity or spatial awareness, depending on whether you're the one that's actually carrying the puck or whether you're off the puck and supporting from an offensive perspective, there's spaces and areas that, I think are there for the taking, depending on what that defensive posture looks like or what the shape of the defense looks like, et cetera. So, we try to explore those types of things quite often. And then, we also look at it like, okay, where's the common areas of pressure that individual might face? And if it's, say you're in an environment where you're working in more of a one-on-one type of an environment with a situation, what I often find myself doing is reminding the player where that pressure tends to be, right? So, if I'm there and I'm doing an assessment or an observation of what it is that they're doing, or if I'm behind the iPod trying to see what's happening, I want them to understand like where some of those pressure points could be. And I want you to work on, altering your route under those types of circumstances. And that way they're always thinking about pressure as I'm going through my rep, that they're not just jumping in the rep and they're solely focused on what their intended target is when they go and release the puck.
We could go deep on that, but we'll save that for next time. That's awesome. I'll just say that we should all be thinking about our routes and working on our timing and figuring out like you said, where pressure is coming from and how we can reroute ourselves to different areas of the ice. Fair enough.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And having, players having the ability to make plays like slip passes and hook passes, right, is become, if you watch, obviously most of us are watching what's happening in the NHL playoffs right now. We see more and more plays that are being made, inside that defender space. And what could happen over time is if a defender constantly gets beat in those areas, they may start shrinking their stick a little bit instead of going stick on puck. In that case, it could be an opportunity for you to hook things either in front or behind, and that could also lead to some additional opportunity for players.
That's a great way to end this episode. Thank you. 2 minutes here at the end. I'll let you talk about anything that you possibly want in the world, or you can just end it right now. It's the floor is all yours.
Yeah, I don't have a huge social media presence, right, and that's partly because I've got other things that are going on, but yeah, from time to time, like I will, put some content out there on Twitter. So my handle is @K Mizwicki. On Instagram, it's Keith_Mizwicki. I've got a website that's in the works, coming soon. Lagging a little bit, but now my time's being occupied by trying to be on the ice as much as I can and maximize the time I can for my players. So yeah, any questions or any additional things that folks want to hit on, feel free to send me a DM or you could shoot me an email too. My contact information is on those social media platforms.
Awesome. And I cannot imagine that you're not going to get quite a few, because there were some juicy meatballs you threw out there that we we skirted around and didn't go down the rabbit hole, but there's a lot of fun items in there that people can really dive into. So thank you so much for your time and expertise. I really appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate you having me, and have a great rest of your week.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.